Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, Eliana's one-time co-host of my favorite podcast aside from this one, which they canceled for reasons that then allowed us to have Eliana on this podcast, host of The Hill on Sunday, columnist with The Hill, a participant in the Dispatch, our friend Chris Stirewalt. I don't know what your title is.
A contributor.
Guy at the Dispatch.
Contributor, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Eliana Johnson, enthusiast.
So many titles.
Best-selling author. What do you want?
So many are your titles. Only
right.
Adam White has more titles than you, as far as I can tell. It is like
Shadow
if
Chief
I mentioned
Justice.
all of Adam White's titles, it would go 55 minutes, and then I have to go right to the recommendation. So you're close, but let us now take advantage of your presence here, Chris, to go into what Jonah would call, rank punditry.
That's what I'm here for,
I threw
brother.
this question at you that is very interesting, but may have a very simple answer. All signs point classically to a Democratic wave in the midterm elections. Presidential approval rating incredibly low. Gas prices going up. Party in power always loses in the midterm election. Very close margins in the House and Senate, and so on. And yet, according to the last three national polls, the generic ballot, that is the question when you were asked if you were to vote today, would you vote for a Democrat or for a Republican?
Or sometimes is asked, would you prefer?
Would you prefer? That these polls are in the Democrats' favor, but by about 3%. And in previous wave elections that actually went wave, those numbers were often at this point close to double digits or in double digits for the party.
I don't know about that.
When? In 2010?
I don't know about no
Republican. No,
I sent you my column for today.
I'm sorry.
I sent it to you. I sent it to you.
I was busy trying to send you the link. I didn't have time to read it. Okay.
I know.
All right.
I blame Christopher
wrong.
Nolan.
By the way, I've been wrong about many things. And, my wife said to me, don't you think you should correct X, Y, or Z? And I said, if I were to correct every mistake I made on this podcast, we would never actually have another version of the podcast. So double check anything I tell you before you tell anybody. So I'm wrong about this. The generic ballot isn't often double digits, but we are in a... Okay, so Chris,
I'm
you
going
are
to read
skeptical.
you the lead. I'm
Yes,
going to read
please.
you the lead.
Okay.
It's halfway through the summer, and despite the midterm curse that's hammered the party with the White House in all but three midterms since the Civil War, the home team is looking a lot better than expected. The best evidence? A generic ballot that is pretty well tied, even though the incumbent president is underwater with voters. Many race watchers are starting to wonder if the administration's happy talk about a truly competitive general election may be more than just spin. The party out of power is being convulsed by a radical insurgency, and the candidate quality coming out of the contested primaries is dubious. Even the suggestion by higher-ups that the majority party might even lose the House was starting to sound blasphemous. For all the dire forecasts of the springtime, this year might actually be different. Or at least that's what the political class was thinking in July of 2010, as then President Barack Obama and his party were trying to grind out a win against a Republican Party still shattered by the debacle of the 2008 election and beset by Tea Party-fueled internal struggles.
A twist! There was a plot twist in that paragraph.
So
Very
the generic I went back through the generic ballot 2010 and beyond. In July, the only time that the generic ballot was predictive was in 2018 in July. Other than that, it's done exactly this. And my point here is you should pay more attention to voter intensity than you should to the top line. So the shorter explanation is the midterm electorate is a third smaller than the quadrennial electorate. You lose the reason the Republicans are in for a beating is it's the midterm curse and it's all of those things, but also their reliance on lower propensity voters, right? So the Trump coalition, they do 65% with the people who are less likely to vote. That's rough, but basically that's it. If you're a low propensity voter, which means strong correlations to non-college educated, working class, rural, small community, Trump kills with those voters. And Republicans have done well 2016, 2020, 2024 with those voters. But typically, and by the way, those are people who substantially supported Barack Obama and substantially supported George Bush. You get to the midterm and those people don't show up. Those are the people who you lose. So you're left with a more engaged electorate, and that means a more partisan electorate. So the essential question isn't, we asked a bunch of people, including a third of whom are not likely to vote, who do you prefer to control Congress? And in a surprising turn, they say, I don't care. I hate them both, and I don't particularly care. So now you peel it back and you say, let's look at the voter intensity number. And Democrats are just slaughtering Republicans on their base. The Republican base is dispirited and disappointed and frustrated. And the Democratic base, while hating the Democratic Party, hates Donald Trump and Republicans more.
I mean, I can't, so you have now answered definitively my question. And the question, so now I'm reminded of things that happened in the past to try and stave off the wave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about 2018, where Democrats won 40 seats in the House, which was way beyond what anybody, I mean, I think
their best performance since Watergate.
Right. But we were like, people were having pools and stuff like that. And I think I was like on the higher end of the pool that I was in, and I said 30. So the 40 number was pretty staggering. And remember, what Trump tried to do was gin up that low propensity voter thing with the caravans. They're coming. They're coming. They're marching up like army ants through Central America, up through Sinaloa, and they're hitting the border. And oh my God, here come the caravans. And it didn't work. And I think we can presume that he has another gimmick. He will come up with something up his sleeve. Some of this, Nick Catoggio, your colleague at the Dispatch, in his nightly news or almost nightly newsletter yesterday, said, if you want to know why Trump keeps saying they're communists, they're communists, they're right. communists about the Democrats, remember the word socialist, which is what they admit, is now not in such terrible odor. But the word communist is still very, very negative. And if he can get Americans to believe that the Democrats are communists, or the low propensity voter that the communists are coming, maybe he can mitigate the damage.
The stated strategy, the public-facing strategy of Susie Wiles and the president's political team, Tony Fabrizio, et cetera, is what you always do when you're losing an election. And it works sometimes. Worked for Democrats in 2012, for example. You say this is not a referendum on the party in power. This is a choice election. You have to choose between two governing visions for the country. And on the one hand, you have the devil you know, and we know you're not happy. But on the other hand, you have radical, disruptive, destructive, chaotic, Graham Platnerian, Abdul El-Sayed. You have the danger that's out here. And if you let these people control Congress, then, the dogs and cats living together, all of that stuff. So that's the stated and obvious strategy. The strategy, and then the Republicans have overlaid two things on that. One is they're having a convention, a midterm convention, which Democrats tried to do back in the 70s, which was a total failure because obviously what you want to do when you're the party in power is have maximum wiggle room for your vulnerable incumbents. You don't want strong branding for the national party. You want like, I did. If you think about how a lot of Republicans survived 2006, it was like, I'm going to pick spots where I can disagree with George W. Bush and slink my way through this in a competitive district. So the strategy one is Trump wants to fire up the base by having a big party. They're doing it in Texas, and they want to like go have a big rah-rah. The other thing he's doing, which is also dubious, is the election interference, the voter fraud stuff. And this is difficult for them in two ways. One, it increases Democratic voter intensity. You tell black voters in Georgia your vote is in peril. Every time I think that Democratic voter intensity can't get higher, they get frothier. Number one. And number two, any place where you make voting harder, I'll put it this way. If I was a Republican, I would be handing out ballots at every Cracker Barrel, wherever large numbers of my voters congregated. I would be there just handing out like, go just vote. We're going to make it as easy as possible. Please, we're begging you to vote. I would not put any if I was a Republican, I would say vote by mail, vote by smoke signal, vote by any means that you can. Just do it. We need you.
Eliana, Chris has laid out the problem with Republicans and intensity. And we're sitting here. It's July 21st. Let me put it this way, and I'm not going to say this. I'm going to preface it so that people who might want to clip this out and like say that I'm an evil person will know that I'm saying this in an amused way. Okay? Nobody likes war more than I do. Okay? No one likes a good American aggression against Muslim totalitarianism more than I do. And I'm sitting here with this 10-day campaign against Iran, and I am saying, what the hell is going on? What are you doing? Now the Iranians, you said they were basically destroyed, and they seem to be able to fire ballistic missiles at will. They're hitting American positions in Jordan. They're hitting all of the Gulf states that are allies of ours. The Houthis are now threatening to close the strait near them. What's the plan? Because if you're losing me, I swear, if you're losing me, I don't know, you think you have a political problem with an unpopular war? You ain't seen nothing yet. Because I am not losable. And I am way moving down the road toward being losable.
I think the president's in a bad place where those of us who support the war effort are dejected and confused by what's going on in this murky middle ground where we're playing tit for tat with Iran, but not moving toward a clear and achievable objective. This is, as the Wall Street Journal reports, that Iran's progress toward a nuclear weapon and their ability to continue to produce nuclear material is more advanced than we thought, that they moved material, not just material, but centrifuges into the Pickaxe Mountain facility. And so folks like us are confused, dejected, and unsatisfied by the ground that we're treading right now. And the anti-interventionists are angry that the president embarked on this project in the first place, and they view the territory that we're on as proof of the correctness of their opposition to the war effort in the first place. Beyond that, I do think the president's in a tricky position right now. We've just lost 3 more American service members, and oil prices are going back up again, and the Strait of Hormuz is not open to commercial traffic. I think this middle ground is going to be tricky to sustain, and he's actually better off choosing one path or the other. As to what you and Chris are discussing, the Republican argument I've best heard in the elite political circles we travel in is we have a shot because we have structural advantages that will, if not overcome, at least give us a shot to compete with Democrats who have the enthusiasm. And those structural advantages come from the gerrymandering efforts and the Supreme Court decision in Calais. And Republicans have more money than the Democrats do because of Ken Martin's pathetic stewardship of the Democratic National Committee. And also, in part, because of candidate quality, where Democrats are in a messy, nasty primary fight in the state of Michigan, which they have to pick up if they're going to take the Senate. And Republicans have had a candidate in Mike Rogers for months. And they had a real shot in Maine. And I think that is getting to be a longer and longer and longer shot as they had their primary race, but they lost their candidate, and nobody knows, nobody's ever heard of these other candidates who are vying for that seat. And they've, like Graham Plattner, none of these people have been vetted.
That brings up an interesting point, by the way. Is the DNC like in real trouble with all this anti-establishment stuff, or is it just like one of those down seasons for them? Because the hatred, the boiling anger toward the establishment, I had forgotten about the DNC entirely. Like, you brought it up, and I had not even been thinking about the DNC playing in these races. They are so far from top of mind, and they seem to be for the voters too. That's something I feel like they should need to correct, even if there will be up years and down years and everything is cyclical and blah, blah, blah. This is one of those moments where they also have a target on their back, don't they?
Seth, let me keep it real sexy for you by talking about campaign finance laws. Okay. The Mitch McConnell was right about McCain-Feingold. And now even Democrats are able to acknowledge the catastrophe. Now, they're going to put the blame on the Supreme Court, but McCain-Feingold was an abominable piece of legislation, and it was ill-conceived and poorly executed. So the soft money to the parties that John McCain and Russ Feingold and others said was the problem in politics went away and was replaced by the super PAC money. Democrats in the 2012-2014 cycle said, we abjure, we're not taking the dark money. And Republicans, Karl Rove, American Crossroads, others were like, yes, we are opening giant pillowcases, throw as much super PAC money into this place that we can. The Republican Party, the Republican National Committee there isn't a Republican National Committee. If you think the Democratic National Committee doesn't matter, quick, tell me who the chairman of the Republican National Committee is. It's Joe Gruters, and nobody knows and nobody cares because it doesn't matter, because the Republican National Committee is an empty vessel. Now, it's an empty vessel with a lot of money in it, because here's what happened. Democrats wouldn't play the super PAC game. Then, belatedly, they said, and Act Blue was part of this, and other groups were part of this. They were like, shoot, we've got to get our billionaires lined up, and we've got to play the game too. We're going to fight fire with fire. So they moved toward what they call dark money. They shift over that way. Republicans, and the Vance case in Ohio that gave us the decision that Eliana sagaciously referenced, is the Republicans said, we're going to win. We're going to win this. So they moved their resources. because the net benefit for the parties is that now they can take that money that previously would have been in PACs competing with toilet paper and erectile dysfunction ads, paying top dollar for the spots. Now they can be run in conjunction with the candidate, and they can run at the reduced political rate. So it's a 3x multiplier for all that money. So the Republicans predicted that they would win. They moved the money into the NRSC, the NRCC, and the RNC, and that money will now flow out.
Just to define that, these are the committees.
For the Senate, for the House, and for the National
One for the
Party.
House and one for the party itself. Okay.
And the Democrats are trying to catch up on that front. And the Ken Martin, did you read the Mark Leibovich piece about Ken Martin's tenure where it was about, can we not do land acknowledgements? Burn in hell, bastard. How dare you? He tried to do in-office work 2 days a week and got basically picketed. It was a totally dysfunctional space. And whether you are a moderate who thinks that Ken Martin is on the right track, or you're a far left, progressive, radical, democratic socialist, it's a bad risk. So the DNC is fallow. And this is the wrong cycle for them to be fallow. If in a rational arrangement, the DNC would be matching the RNC, but basically it just doesn't exist.
I don't want to pick back up on the Iran point if we're not done with this. So we started down that road, then we came back.
More part of it than we're yet getting to, and we need to bring them together.
Yeah. I found the exclusive story in the Journal shockingly upsetting, actually. Because
this is the story that they've moved the
centrifuges
into Pickaxe Mountain.
Right. Because, John, I think in some sense I was even less losable on this than you, in that I've been saying, look, as long as the Iranian nuclear program has been rubbled, we got to see to some other things there before we get out. But it's hard for me to look back on an American effort that killed off the Iranian nuclear program as ultimately a mistake. So now at this point, what was accomplished? This is sort of assuming the worst about the Journal report and assuming that it's completely accurate. There is certainly no regime change. There's the help on the way for the Iranian people that never came. Iran clearly has an effective missile and drone capacity still, and the nuclear program isn't dead, and they are still pressuring the Strait. So this is, I thought Trump was in a bad situation yesterday. He's in a much worse one today, as far as I can tell.
Okay, so let's talk about the worst situation, because is he in a worse situation or is he not? If this Israeli intelligence, which is what the Wall Street Journal said, where they derived the fact of this, that the centrifuges are located in a single spot, and we have these bombs, and they're called bunker busters. They're 2,000-pound bombs. We can blow up Pickaxe Mountain in about an hour right from now. All he has to do is give the order. And what's more, the Israelis, who have been sitting on the sidelines and are happy to sit on the sidelines, because the Strait, if the Strait is the issue, Israel is not involved in the Strait. Israel has specific things to deal with in Lebanon, with the proxy war, and it has specific things to deal with Iran on the nuclear program. If they have discerned this in Pickaxe Mountain, if that intelligence is reliable, one can assume that this leak exists as a spur to focus the administration's attention on the fact that it has a big fat target sitting there, stationary target, not mobile missiles, not things on the shoreline, where they know where it is. And Trump every now and then says, we'll blow up Pickaxe Mountain, and then doesn't do it. If he does it, action is what changes political dynamics. The tit for tat is trench is an air version of World War I trench warfare, in which for 4 years nothing happens, and people move like 45 feet in a month out of the trench they're in, and then have to dig yet another one. So either he's going to change the facts on the ground here that you laid out really well about how the goals that were systematically part of the Iran effort, none of them has been achieved, and he will attempt to achieve them. Or I think Eliana's right, then he should just turn tail.
Yeah, I mean,
cut his losses.
The problem is that he's simultaneous. I mean, there's a renewal of stories about intimations of resumed negotiations, resumed talks. So he's while we're getting this report about Iran moving centrifuges, he's seemingly also on this negotiating track. So that's the problem right now, because he's sort of instituted one plan that runs counter to the other, which is based on the facts on the ground.
Right. Well, and JD Vance made an interesting comment on this on the Rogan on the 47-hour Rogan hangout that he did. The Rogan filibuster.
Yeah, I thought at the end they were both going to sing "You'll Never Walk Alone" and weep.
But he said at one point JD Vance, the person responsible for overseeing the general architecture of these talks, right, said that the thing that needed to be done regarding Iran's nuclear program has already been done. This is the fundamental thing. I don't know whether he's right or not, but he said the thing that had to be done was to stop Iran from, to bomb its nuclear installations, to make it so that they couldn't race to a bomb, and to make it so that they can't rebuild their bomb building infrastructure. And JD Vance, the vice president, said that's what we did. So that is within the administration, there is this belief that none of this is necessary, while the president is out there saying this, at least part of this war is about Iran's nuclear program and really finishing it off. But the guy negotiating on behalf of the United States doesn't believe that. And so
but
Trump
doesn't believe it either, because Trump says they're finished, they're through, they're finished, they're through, they're finished, they're through. Then they fire a missile at Kuwait, it hits something. They fire a missile at Jordan, they kill 3 of our guys. 400 Americans have been wounded, it turns out, in Iranian attacks since the war started. Now, that's a small number, but we haven't committed troops on the ground anywhere. So, that means we're talking about service personnel that are just stationed in the Middle East getting hit, in the crossfire. He's the one, he is still hewing to the line that, what's going on here are kind of I don't know, death rattles, or, it's just the last desperate efforts of a dying man trying to fight us off or something like that. And that flies in the face of reality from what we can tell. Ruel Garect and Ray Takea have a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning that explains how really Trump's conduct of the war has caused a form of solidarity inside Iran that did not exist before the war. That it's not the rally round the flag thing that you would think it might be, right? That the public is like, how dare you attack us? It is that the disparate elements of the regime now realize that they will either hang together or they will surely hang separately. The IRGC is working in tandem with the political elements and the mullahs and all of that, and that the negotiations, as well as the fire, as well as the missiles, these are all part of a singular strategy that gives Iran's renewed purpose, and that the triumph of the Hormuz strategy is like we're showing it. We're showing the great Satan that it's it's a hollow shell, or they're a bunch of fools, and they're
also
good about it.
demoralizing to the public. Like, even if it's not causing the rally around the flag with the public, it's pretty demoralizing if you're in the public and you've been the target of these crackdowns, and you see this. As Bob Dylan said, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing.
Right.
And so
I
it's
think
just
okay. So, but I do think, and Chris, help me out here. So things are not, nothing in politics is baked in the cake. We didn't know Graham Plattner was going to collapse. Okay. Chris on the video did
some things are baked in the cake.
Right.
I'm ready to call 25 states in the 2028 presidential election
fair
right
enough.
now.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. Okay. But what I mean is that politics is dynamic. It responds to real world events and and if we, I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but if we won the war in Iran, because he's not defining what victory is, but if we won the war in Iran before October 15th, even though Democrats don't seem to care, and even though it's foreign policy and Americans don't care and all of that, but if it were an undeniable fact that we had achieved our aims in Iran, which is why I think he said he always wanted to get the dust. He wanted a ceremony where they would hand him the nuclear materials
at the FIFA stadium. They would have the FIFA president would hand him the dust. Yes,
and he would run,
he was going to scatter them like ashes over the Gulf of America,
like Salt Bay. Yes,
yeah. No, he was going to run into the picture where they're handing in the. So, but if there were a decisive moment where Trump scored a personal triumph of some sort, or the Republicans scored a triumph of some sort, it's July 21st. The election is November 2nd? 4th?
I don't know. Yes. I'll definitely be there.
We are. I mean, that would be something. I mean,
the only thing worse than an unpopular war is losing an unpopular war. And what the Republicans, so do you remember when the president was saying to the Iranians for public consumption, and Democrats were pouncing, they pounceth on, I don't care about people's finances. I don't care about midterms. I'll do anything that I want. I'll destroy your civilization. Nothing matters to me. Going madman theory. And the world looked at that and said, that's not true. That's not true. This is when you talk to hawkish Republicans, the appetite for any kind of ground troops is basically zero, right? I'm sure if we talk to Tom Cotton or whoever, there'd be somebody who would make the case for we have to seize territory on the strait. We've got to be a credible deterrent. I'm sure we could find people, individual Republicans, R.I.P. Lindsey Graham, who would make a forceful case for why the deployment of U.S. forces inside the territorial boundaries of Iran is important and necessary to bring the war to a successful conclusion. 90% of Republicans are going to be no. They're just going to say it's a midterm. We're not putting the psychology. J.D. Vance is so interesting in this, and his stuff about it's Israel is undermining. It's a COINTELPRO secret effort by the Israelis to sabotage these negotiations and make me look bad. It's like, brother, you don't need any help from Israeli intelligence to make this look bad. This has looked bad from the beginning. It has been unpopular the whole time. And the idea that at this point there is any appetite, even among MAGA, like, the three kinds of the three kinds of Republicans: always Trump, never Trump, and always Republican. The always Republican, the people who are like, just tell me where to vote. You just tell me where to vote because I'm here to vote against Democrats. There's no appetite among those people for any kind of ground troop commitment. The Iranians pretty obviously knew that this was the limiting reagent on Trump's undertaking. And you guys would know this better than I do. I assume that what happened was that back in January, the Pentagon said, okay, here's how we could proceed against Iran. And there's scenario one, which is we get lucky. It's a Venezuela situation. 4 to 5 weeks, we knock out the leadership and the whole thing falls apart. And we find ourselves with, like we did in Syria, a compliant partner in da-da-da-da-da. And then I assume that General Kane or whomever was like, and then there's scenario 2, and then there's scenario 3, and then there's scenario 4. And scenario 4 is we have to go all in on Iran, right? We got to go. And I assume that what happened was Donald Trump and the power of positive, the Norman Vincent Peale presidency, that Donald Trump was like, no, I'll take A. And they said, no, we don't mean that you get to pick which one of these. We're telling you these are the potential kinds of scenarios that are going to play out. And he'd stopped listening, started it. And when the scenarios that had been laid out for him, other scenarios start to come to pass, he's like, nope, I want to go back to scenario A. I want to go back to scenario. I want A. I told you guys I want A, and now I'm mad at you. And my reading of history tells me that when you have a conflict like this, where you are in an escalation trap and neither side can figure out how to untangle themselves, that you end up with a bigger war, right? Like, I don't know that that's true, but I don't think that there's a way. I don't see the way right now that this ends without a substantial U.S. commitment against Iran. Whether we do it now or whether we do it, the beautiful rhyme of history would be that President J.D. Vance gets to be the one who gives the address to the nation about why the First Expeditionary Force is landing in Iran. But I don't see the way we get out of this in a poof with a handshake and some dust.
So politically, Trump lives partially in a reality of his construction that he has actually successfully constructed, and then partially in a fantasy that he has not been able to turn into a reality. And I think your description of the I like A thing is a very, very well put, that when you provide a leader with the possible results of action, and he says, no, I want this end, and you're like, no, we can't get to the end. We don't know. But, and then he doesn't define the end. I mean, ultimately, I keep saying this, like the day that we started the war, I think Abe and I both said, like, if this war doesn't involve regime change, you're not going to get your ultimate desideratum. The Iranian nuclear program, is, what was it that guy Bill Mitchell said? MAGA was in our hearts all along, or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
The Iranian nuclear program is in the hearts of the mullahs and the IRGC. It doesn't
maybe
go away.
maybe the Iranian nuclear dust were the friends we made along the way.
way.
Friends
That's
away. They can start at any time if they have the money. They already have the plans for the centrifuges. It's like they have to go away for the nuclear program to go away. Ultimately, the regime has to end if the nuclear ambitions are to end. Since he refused to define it that way because he was trying to hew to his prior commitment to not do regime change wars, when in fact he was doing a regime change war, but he wouldn't admit it. Here we are in the classic, formulation that Bismarck used that I think that Kissinger quoted, right? Woe betide the statesman whose reasons for the war he began are less clear at the end than they were at the beginning.
Which is why J.D. Vance has to blame Israel.
Right.
It can't be that they went off on a lark, have had a misadventure, and now find themselves. This is like Tony Blair, where it's like, oh well, I was misled. If I would have known, I was ensorcelled. I was pulled into this conflict. I think there's a very small number of Americans on the left and the right who are obsessed with Jew hatred, who are obsessed with Israel, who are consumed by it. I think the number is very small. I think as the political salience of the people, the power of no group has been as overstated as the anti-Semite and anti-Semitic curious on the left and right, and their power. Like if we think about Michigan right now, the claim of the Democratic Socialists and the claim of Abdul El-Sayed is Kamala Harris lost the election because of Israel. It's not true. There is an argument that I do not find ultimately persuasive, but I find interesting that in Michigan, which has the largest Arab American population in the country, 250,000 Muslim Americans mostly in Wayne County and Metro Detroit.
I think it's closer to 400,000 actually, but
in the electorate, in the electorate.
250 in the electorate. Okay.
Yeah. So if we say, is it possible that actual crossovers to Trump in this, that Michigan was close enough, it was the closest state of the battleground states. Is it possible? And the answer is, yeah, maybe it's possible. Then I look over to Wisconsin. No, there are not enough college campus radicals. There certainly are not enough. The margins every place else. Kamala Harris lost the 2024 election because she seemed like a nincompoop and prices were too high.
By the way, just to move to that point that you bring up, and then Eliana, you got some stuff to tell us about the El-Sayed family. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor to Biden, effectively told the New Yorker this week that Abdul El-Sayed's claim is true. According to Jake Sullivan, the Biden administration made a mistake in indulging Israel. And forgive me for forgetting when they indulged Israel, since all I saw after the first 6 weeks of support was pull back, don't do that. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Where's the ceasefire? You're being too mean. Where's the food? Stop the food. Have a ceasefire. Forget the hostages. Go in, go out. I've seen the maps, and Jake Sullivan, who wants to be Secretary of State in the next Democratic administration, has decided, and has a wife who is a Democratic congressman from New Hampshire, has decided to join what is now increasingly a mainstream idea in the Democratic Party. If he is holding it, that this thing that you say is not true, which is that Kamala lost the war because of Biden being too soft on Israel, or therefore because of Israel, that's a pretty astounding thing for him to say.
By the way, Maggie Goodlander is his wife, and she voted for the Massey Amendment, just so we know. Not she and Jake Sullivan are not the same person, all the caveats, but since we mentioned the New Hampshire connection.
So she voted to cut off military assistance to Israel. Okay. Anyway, this to me is a Rubicon crossing, because it means that the thing that happened to the liberals and the left in the 1960s is now really happening full bore in the Democratic Party, as represented by the vote for the Massey Amendment and by this moment, which is they are looking to the future and saying those guys are the future. Abdul El-Sayed, Graham Plattner, Mamdani, Daria Lazar-Chevalier, they are the future, and we are going to jump on their bandwagon. We are not going to fight them. We are not going to oppose them. We are not going to fight them for the soul of the party. we are going with them. Now, here's a good reason why they should be more prudent from Eliana, having to do with this key candidacy.
That's a great
Abdul
tease.
El-Sayed.
What a good that's a Sunday show level tease right there. That's excellent.
Thank you. Okay, well, if you ever take vacation, I'd be happy to sit in for you.
Real quickly on Sullivan.
Yeah.
I was not surprised at all to hear him say this. I think this is a finger in the wind statement about where he not thinks but knows the Democratic Party is going, because he is maybe the most ambitious foreign policy figure in the Democratic Party. And if we look back to the last time he made headlines in early May, it was for rebooting the the outside Democrat foreign policy group, National Security Action, which he and Ben Rhodes are chairing, and they tapped to lead that group a Biden National Security Council official and anti-Israel activist by the name of Maher Bitar, who is an El-Sayed type. And that was a decision endorsed by Sullivan for, again, these very reasons. Right. That's where he thinks the party is going.
Thank you.
But you've got scoop on El-Sayed. That's what I'm here for. That's what was promised.
Let's get the scoop. Let's get to the scoop.
All right. So, the Beacon has been doing lots of reporting on El-Sayed, and this morning our piece is about his half-sister, who is a professor in the Department of Comparative Human Development at
my alma mater.
Yes. Yes.
I am sorry. I apologize to the American people for what you're about to hear.
At the University of Chicago, who I was most struck that she chastised Bernie Sanders in the wake of October 7th, 2023, for condemning Hamas. And she was arrested last July at an anti-ICE protest for spitting on the cops. And made headlines then. She has a different last name. Her name is Ayman Abdel-Hadi. And so she hasn't been connected to El-Sayed. I'm sure you guys will be shocked to hear he hasn't been featuring her in campaign videos or bringing her out on the campaign trail, although he just did start airing an ad campaign with his step-grandparents who have the last name Johnson.
Your cousin?
Landsman.
Yeah,
Landsman, right there.
Ms. Abdel-Hadi has not been featured. She also is a vicious anti-Israel activist and a campaigner against the police. We have a tweet embedded in the piece where she says, "Good morning, Jummah Mubarak and F the police." And she savaged. She herself appears to be gay, but she savaged participants in a gay rights protest after the Pulse nightclub shooting for praising the cops who were protecting them. The University of Chicago has also launched an investigation into her for her participation into an event where she got up and said, F the University of Chicago, described the university as a colonial landlord and a police force, and said essentially that she had only decided to stay engaged in the university because she realized it was a potent source of, people who she could organize for her Palestine activism.
Okay.
I love, by the way, just as an aside, I love that academia is like this place somehow where you can stand up and say F my employer, and it's just like it's not actually a big deal.
Their response was like,
Abe does it all the time. That's all Abe ever does.
That actually was their response.
Okay, this is I'm now going to take this on a slight tangent because everything is coming together here. I just want to read to you So she is a member of the Department of Comparative Human Development at the University
What
of
is
Chicago.
that?
Now,
What
let me
is
explain.
comparative human
But
development?
let me explain that when I was at the University of Chicago, there were the studies world had not yet happened. The breakup into studies and the sort of balkanization of these sorts of things. So this sort of thing did not happen when I was there, but I did graduate 44 years ago. About the Department of Comparative Human Development on the University of Chicago's own website, quote, "The Department of Comparative Human Development is an interdisciplinary program at the critical edge of thought and research in the social sciences,
Dang.
examining what it means to be human during a contemporary moment marked by rapid social, technological, and ecological change, massive global developments of people and ideas, and wide-ranging forms of inequality. We conduct interdisciplinary, holistic, and comparative research and scholarship focused on individual lives within various changing and heterogeneous contexts.
Is this
Department
sociology?
members are committed to examining
It used to be in
humans
sociology.
Oh, God.
as simultaneously sociocultural, biological, and psychological beings who change over development and historical times to unique space for research addressing topics including difference, equality, power in multicultural societies, the development, symbolic, and embodied processes involved in learning and socialization, and the social shaping of vulnerability and resilience in relation to shifting categories such as gender, race, class, age, sexuality, and ability, among others." And finally, they do research in both non-U.S. and U.S. settings and using diverse methods, which includes qualitative interviewing and field research with, quote, non-human animals. So apparently this is the new term, is you cannot just refer to animals. You have to say non-human animals, since humans are, of course, animals. And this seems to be privileging humans over, let's say, cockroaches. Okay, so they're getting what they paid for at Chicago. Like she's right there. She's like a puzzle piece, fits right there in the makes, completes the puzzle of psychotic campus turnover to radical bullshit. And there she is. It is amazing. And there she is. And her brother is, talking about giving Medicare for all while his wife, her sister-in-law, doesn't take Medicare for her patients.
Can I just point out the challenge of Abdul El-Sayed? So he is often styled as the Midwest Mamdani. And while I know, I speculate that there are not a huge number of Mamdani fans on this podcast currently, that I am not, that New Yorker.
Yeah, Matt
John,
left. So
yeah. So I assume that this is not a DSA hangout. Zoran Mamdani is a gifted politician who is he thinks about communication constantly. That is an Instagram account with a mayor's office attached to it, and is really good. And the other thing that Mamdani is very good at is he is very flexible, right? He is loose as a goose, brother. You want me to go down and hang out with Donald Trump and bring him a dummy front page to make him feel, yeah, sure, whatever. Mamdani has had multiple identities in his life. He's been the rapper, he's been the activist, he's been whatever. And I'm not saying that he doesn't believe anything, but I don't think his faith or what, I think these things are, I think he wears them loosely. Abdul El-Sayed is a believer, right? He believes things. And when you look at his family, when you look at his life, when you look at his career, when you look at what he's about, he believes in these things. He is adamant. And where Mamdani, and I was out in Michigan, Nexstar hosted a debate out there. I was there. I saw him in the reporter scrum. I watched him do all the stuff. And El-Sayed is glib. He's quick. He is good at staying on message. But I think the reason he is struggling to put that away in Michigan is that he is actually, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, he is actually radical. He has actually radical ideas, and he has actually radical beliefs. And I think the reason that he's getting creamed with black voters, which is if he loses this election, it will be because of black voters, mostly in Wayne County. If you saw the Detroit News poll, he's down 2-1 with black voters. In Michigan, Democratic politics, you don't want to be down 2-1 with black voters. And I think his ultimate problem is that he is a true believer. And in 2026 American politics, that can be a hindrance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Mamdani is like is what he is, which is like he looks like a woke liberal. He sounds, I should say, like a woke liberal raised through academia. He doesn't sound like an Islamist, sleeper agent of some kind, whatever. Mamdani seems like he's just totally from a different world than that.
Daria Eliza Chevalier seems like an Islamist. I mean, she's a convert to Islam after October 7th. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she is.
Oh, yeah, she is.
I don't think that El-Sayed, though, is any more of a true believer than Mamdani, particularly on the Israel issue. Look at Mamdani's wife. Look at his father. That really is the through line of his career. Despite El-Sayed's political talent, which I think is significant, I just think he's worse at hiding it than Mamdani, who is a real talent, or just it's either that or he's less willing to give in on it out of principle. In that interview with Tapper over the weekend, it would have been quite I was going to raise, right? Yes, it would have been quite easy for El-Sayed to say, you know what, that was silly. I'm happy the Ayatollah's dead. He was an oppressor of Muslims. I mean, the third possibility is he's actually afraid of this Dearborn Muslim community. I mean, he is obviously sympathetic to them. And that's something Mamdani didn't have to contend with in New York in the same way.
This is my point, which is rootless cosmopolitanism has its advantages in politics. And I think I see Mamdani as a citizen of the world who is fluent in many cultures and in many places. And the Obama comparison there for me is pretty obvious. Like, he's kind of an internationalist, he's kind of a whatever, and he knows how to he's a smoothie, right? And I see that. But whether it is, so you raise the possibility, very legitimate possibility of fear, right? That he's captured by his base, that he'd like to be as pliable as Mamdani publicly, but he's afraid of his base. So I don't know how much it is that he is a true believer and how much of it is he is captured by the base that he's in. But the radicalism of, and this goes back to the original point about how salient is Israel as an issue really. And for those for many of those 250,000 voters in Metro Detroit, it is the number one issue, right? And what I am observing in the Democratic Party right now is not dissimilar to what I observed in the Republican Party in the 2010s, which is on large and important questions that have implications for the future. The party establishment says, and was it whose wife is the Congresswoman? Which guy?
Jake Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan.
Yeah.
So for the Jake Sullivans, for the Republicans, the Republican equivalent of Jake Sullivan in 2010, where it's like, is Barack Obama a secret Muslim? Look, we're not going to. Let's not waste time on that. We're focused on cap and trade. Is Lou Dobbs right that a caravan loaded with Muslim extremists, Islamists, is snaking towards the U.S. border as part of an invasion to replace us? Let's not focus on these things. Let's go ahead and stipulate. So I watched the Republican Party lose its mind out of hoping that the crocodile would eat them last, right? I watched the Republicans give in, just give in. So what I'm watching Democrats do right now on the question of Israel, but on the questions of anti-Semitism more broadly, is we don't need this heat right now. Just give them what they want. Let's take this issue off the table. I just don't want to talk about it right now. And because it's a low salience issue with persuadable voters, it makes political sense at the beginning. I'm not going to have a fight over this right now. They just want to cut off funding for Israel. Israel says they want funding cut off too. Let's let's burn this one and go on. What they don't know is that they will be captive in the same way that the Republicans became captive.
If I
Can I
could,
say, I
Ed,
just want to, just on this Mamdani El-Sayed comparison, to my mind, there's no clear way to really discern who's more of a true believer here. I think they're both pretty much true believers. I mean, look, I wrote way back when that I think to understand Mamdani's animus toward Israel and involvement in groups that support Hamas and so on, that if you're looking at it through an Islamist lens, that's wrong. It's the radical socialist lens. So, to that extent, I think that's true. Although I'm less certain of that as time goes on, but I think that's true. But I think the real difference here is that Mamdani is usually superficially more pleasant than El-Sayed. But I mean, if you look at how they both handled the question of do you believe in Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, it's arguable that Mamdani's line was sort of more inflexible than El-Sayed. El-Sayed was asked this by Livia Reingold a few months back or a few weeks back, and he said, "Well, what is it? What do you mean by a Jewish state?" And he sort of, he actually tried to, I don't know, be philosophical about it. What did Mamdani say? I do not believe in I cannot support any state that privileges one religion over another. It's false, but inflexible answer. So it's very hard for me to really, to tease out the differences. If you're saying Mamdani's more gifted politician, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about the selling of the soul for a second here, because I've been reading. I recommended this last week.
Make me an offer, John.
No, I was reading. Last week I recommended this pretty remarkable book by Zaid Dorn, the son of Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, the two Weather Underground people, and it just came out, his memoir, Dangerous, Dirty, Violent, and Young, and I hit a passage that I think is incredibly resonant for now about the Democrats and where they're going and the danger posed to them by the concessions that they are making. And it is Bernadine Dorn, who ended up as a domestic terrorist, who was on the run for more than a decade with her family after several criminal events in which she was materially involved. And in 1968, she had not yet become a radical, violent terrorist. She had actually, in 67, done some work for Martin Luther King, trying to find out who the bad landlords were in Chicago when she was a student at the University of Chicago Law School. And then she joined the Students for a Democratic Society, which was the umbrella group that was started at the University of Michigan in 1962 that was essentially the national group of leftist organization on college campuses and, against the war in Vietnam and others. And when they had a meeting 2 months after King's death, Zaid Dorn writes, SDS held a meeting to elect new leadership. And even though she had been a member of the group for less than a year, Bernadine was put forward as a candidate, part of the Revolutionary Youth Movement slate, promising to take SDS in a more militant, radical direction. They met in plenary session to ask questions of the new candidates. Bernadine, the only woman on stage, faced vocal skepticism about her radical bona fides. Do you consider yourself a socialist? A man in the audience called out, drawing jeers and mocking laughter from the crowd. Now remember, in our context, the word socialist now is in very good odor with Democrats. Democrats have a favorable view of the term socialist. Okay? Bernadine stared him down for a long moment of silence. I consider myself, she said finally, a revolutionary communist. She was elected in a landslide. Suddenly at 26, Bernadine was one of the 3 co-equal national leaders of SDS. That same year, the movement and the organization served above 100,000. There is no way to be committed to nonviolence, Bernadine told a crowd of SDS members, in the middle of the most violent society history has ever created. And 18 months later, she was involved in bombings and the making of bombs that led to the blowing up of a townhouse in Greenwich Village, and she was on the run. And why do I bring this up? Because the DSA is the SDS, and we are seeing a nascent, a boulder is rolling down a hill. Now, they're doing an interesting thing because they are actually running for office, which SDSniks didn't really start doing until after 1972, after the wave of terrorism, and they realized that they needed to sort of like get out of it and start like functioning in proper society. But if this socialist movement gains steam, and since so many of them, as we hear them on TikTok and others, say they're not really socialists, but they are communists and they are revolutionaries and they believe in armed resistance, and their heroes are Hamas, who are violent resistors and all of that. How long before Bernadine Dorn 2026 turns into bombs 2028? How long?
Well, the SDS posters have been all over campus with the, we should say, with the, excuse me, the Tentifada has had, SDS was the Bring the War Home post. One of their more famous, posters was Bring the War Home. The Tentifada folks held up signs that were designed in, to reflect the modern Gaza left. But the general design was borrowed from the SDS, and the words on the sign were "Bring the war home." I mean, literally, they are aping them, they are copying them, they are using the banners, and there was even an SDS political cartoon that was the subject of some controversy at one of the universities. I don't remember which it was, but I want to say Harvard. But it was basically accused, it was trying to resuscitate tensions between black students and Jewish students. And it was using an actual SDS ad and cartoon from an earlier time. So they've gone to the archives and they are building their movement in large part based on this.
Right. So this is something, so if that's what Jake Sullivan wants to start associating himself with the sort of Cassius Hathaline and Hungry look strategy that he is adopting here to figure out his way through to having a powerful political role behind the scenes in American politics for the rest of his life, he better keep his powder dry, because yesterday somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at the ICE station in Lower Manhattan. Now, a Molotov cocktail is not a bomb yet. It's not a bomb yet.
It was not to diminish. He dumped gas. He dumped some. To be technical in our definition of Molotov of cocktails, Molotov is. It's supposed to go kaboom. He dumped gasoline on the ground in front, and he's obviously, it goes without saying, is unwell.
Right. But it's ICE. But that's ICE. So we do have ICE is becoming the institution. If an institution triggers actual armed resistance, and you could say that we've seen some elements of this over the last year, it will be ICE.
Kurt Vonnegut My favorite, is this a pro or anti Vonnegut podcast? Where
It
are we on
depends on,
Vonnegut?
it's pro Harrison Bergeron and anti
Okay.
Slaughterhouse
All
Five.
right. I
How's
got to
that?
read. I've got to read now. The Vonnegut line that always comes back to me these days is, we are what we pretend to be, so we should be careful about what we pretend to be. And I see people pretending to be SNCC members and aping the violent radicalism that plagued the nation in the 1970s and Weather Underground cosplay. I see people doing brown shirt cosplay and pretending to be Nazis. And I think you all are going to fool around. And Eliana's heard it many times, so bear with me as I repeat it. It is my theory of the pumpkin spice latte, which is Starbucks does not care whether you enjoy your pumpkin spice latte, ironically or sincerely, as long as you buy it. And it's even better if you tweet it, right? It's even better if you want to make fun of buying a pumpkin spice latte and say that you're a basic bee and wearing Ugg boots and tweet it out and make fun of it. Great. Engaging with the product is even better as long as you're buying. And I think we have this thing among overeducated or well-educated elites looking for meaning in their lives in a what's his name? A Schumpeterian hellscape where we lack creative destruction and we have this surplus elite problem, that we have all these people pretending to be dangerous things, and they will end up becoming those dangerous things. It will come to pass. And when did you see One Battle? What was the review? What was the Podoret's review of One Battle After Another?
I thought it was very brilliant, and it does have ultimately a pretty evil message at the end, which is that failed revolutionaries can give birth to successful, wonderful revolutionaries using the same tactics in a more modern fashion.
I agree. There was a Pollyanna-ish and then we'll be the good revolutionaries in the future. But when I started watching that movie, my son, the brilliant Newman Stirewalt, was like, "No, you should see it." And I was like, "I don't want to see this agitprop garbage. I'm not interested. I don't need that. It's too long." And when I finally did watch it, I was like, "Oh." And I agree with you about the conclusion and the sunny uplands of history part. But I thought, "Oh, we're closer to this than I thought. We're closer to this than I thought we were." And things like people dumping gas on the ice, how much of this stuff how many of these do you take? How many Charlottesvilles, how many whatever does it take until we're like, well, I guess we're just doing it now. Now we're just actually doing it. And it is a concern.
Okay, well, Chris,
my favorite thing about the DSA, about the SDS rather, is the story that William F. Buckley, when he wrote out the phrase "Students for a Democratic Society," would put a parentheses SIC next to the word democratic.
Okay, I got to finish with an anecdote about Commentary Magazine.
I want it.
1962, a manuscript comes into the offices of Commentary Magazine, then edited by my father, by Tom Hayden, and it is the manifesto of the Students for a Democratic Society, as Commentary was then thought to be the vanguard publication of a young, active, exciting left that was unsatisfied with present-day liberal nostrums and that sort of thing. And he read it, and he thought it was pretentious, ridiculous gobbledygook, and he rejected it and sent it back to Tom Hayden. And so that was one of those hinge moments in history where Commentary could have been sort of the surfacer of the Students for a Democratic Society in intellectual circles, but that was not to be. So among the many wise decisions my father made in his life, that may have been among the wisest. Anyway, Chris Stirewalt, I was about
see
to
you
call
at Port
you.
Huron.
I was about to call you, to the Port Huron statement, exactly. I was about to call you Jim Trafficant because that's the name that you put on your Zoom here, and just gave me wonderful memories of America's most demented, comically demented politician in our lifetimes.
Mobbed up and nutty as a peach orchard boar, Youngstown's finest, James Trafficant.
There we go. Congrats. So to our pseudo Jim Trafficant, Chris Stirewalt, thank you for joining us again, and for Abe, Seth, and Eliana, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.